Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer, and today, my friends, we are diving into something that is going to absolutely blow your mind, because what I am about to show you is not just a coin, it is a piece of American history so rare, so extraordinary, so jaw-dropping in its value that most people would walk right past it without ever knowing what they had in their hands. And I want you to think about something for just a second. Think about the last time you reached into your pocket or dug through an old drawer or cracked open a dusty coin jar that belonged to your grandparents, because here is the thing, the coin we are talking about today has been hiding in plain sight for decades, passed from hand to hand, dropped into tip jars, tossed into fountains, and the people who had it never once stopped to look twice. And that is the cruelest kind of fortune to lose without ever knowing you had it, because this coin, this tiny, humble, almost laughably ordinary-looking wheat penny, from 1948 with the D Mint mark from the Denver Mint, has been valued by collectors and numismatic experts at a staggering, almost incomprehensible $352 million. And yes, you heard that correctly, $352 million for a penny, a 1-cent coin, something most of us would not even bother to pick up off the sidewalk, and that number alone should stop you cold. Because we are not talking about a gold bar, or a diamond necklace, or some ancient artifact locked behind glass in a museum. We are talking about a coin that was minted during one of the most turbulent and transformative periods in all of American history, a coin that carries within its small bronze body an entire era of struggle, triumph, and human stories that most of us were never taught in school. So buckle up and stay with me all the way to the end of today's video, because I promise you, the deeper we go into this coin, the more your jaw is going to drop, and I also want you to know right now that today we are covering not just one, but multiple incredible wheat pennies in this video, each one more astonishing than the last, and by the time we reach the final coin in today's lineup, you are going to be absolutely speechless. So do not touch that back button, do not skip ahead, every single second of this video is worth your time. Because the coins coming after this one carry secrets that even seasoned collectors did not see coming. Now let us get into the 1948 D wheat penny and understand exactly why this coin is sitting at the very top of the numismatic world. The year 1948 was not just any year in America, it was a year of rebuilding, of hope, of transition from the shadow of World War II into a new era of prosperity and possibility. Soldiers had come home, families were reuniting, the economy was starting to hum again, and the United States Mint was working overtime to keep up with the demand for circulating coinage. The Denver Mint, in particular, was an absolute powerhouse of production during this period, cranking out millions upon millions of coins to feed the growing economy, and that is actually part of what makes certain 1948 D wheat pennies so extraordinarily valuable. Because when you are producing coins at that kind of industrial scale and speed, mistakes happen, and some of those mistakes are not just little blemishes or imperfections. Some of them are the kind of errors that transform a 1-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar treasure. And the most prized of all the 1948 D wheat penny varieties is what collectors call a double die obverse error. Now let me explain what that means in plain language, because this is where things get really fascinating. When the mint creates a coin die, which is the metal stamp used to press the design into the coin blank, sometimes during the hubbing process, which is the process of pressing the design into the die gets pressed more than once, and it shifts ever so slightly between pressings. And the result is a coin that shows a doubling effect on the design elements. You can see it in the date, you can see it in the lettering, you can see it in Lincoln's portrait itself, and when you hold a genuine 1948 D double die wheat penny under a magnifying glass, and you see that unmistakable, beautiful doubling, you are holding something that collectors will move mountains to acquire. And the reason the value climbs so astronomically high is because of the intersection of rarity and condition, because not every double die coin that survives is in pristine shape. Most of them have been circulated, scratched, worn down by decades of use, but the specimens that survive in mint state condition, coins graded MS65 or higher by the Professional Coin Grading Service or the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, those are the ones that send auction rooms into a frenzy. Those are the ones that have collectors flying in from across the world just for a chance to bid. And the $352 million valuation attached to the finest known example of this coin is not a random number pulled from thin air. It is the result of years of expert analysis, provenance research, and the simple law of supply and demand applied to one of the rarest objects on the planet, because when there is only one known specimen in that condition, it can be worth whatever the most passionate collector in the world is willing to pay, and that number keeps climbing every single year. And here is the part that should make your heart race a little, because experts believe that there may still be undiscovered examples of this coin out there in the world, tucked away in old collections, sitting in estate sales, hidden in rolls of pennies that nobody has bothered to sort through in 50 years, and that means the next person to find one could be anyone. It could be someone who inherited a coin collection from a relative and never thought to have it appraised. It could be someone who picked up a jar of old pennies at a garage sale for $2. It could even be you, sitting at home right now watching this video, which is exactly why I want you to pay very close attention to everything I am about to tell you, because knowing what to look for is the difference between spending a fortune and recognizing one. So when you are examining a 1948 D-Wheat penny, the very first thing you want to check is the mint mark, that small letter D located just below the date on the obverse of the coin. Confirming you have a Denver Mint coin is your first step. Then you want to look at the coin under magnification. A simple jeweler's loupe works perfectly, and you are scanning for any signs of doubling in the date numerals, in the words Liberty and I in God We Trust, and in the details of Lincoln's portrait, specifically around his eye and ear, because on the finest known double die specimens, the doubling is dramatic and unmistakable. It is not a subtle trick of the light. It is a genuine duplication of design elements that your eye can catch even without expert training once you know what you are looking for. And beyond the double die variety, there are other error types associated with the 1948 D-Wheat penny that also command enormous premiums, including off-center strikes where the design is misaligned on the coin blank, repunched mint marks where the D was stamped more than once at slightly different angles, and die cap errors where a coin blank gets stuck to the die and creates a bottle cap shaped coin with the design on the inside. Each of these varieties tells a story of a moment of human imperfection inside a massive industrial process. A split second where something went wrong and created something that would one day be priceless. And there is something almost poetic about that, the idea that our most valuable treasures are often born from our mistakes, that the flaws are what make something irreplaceable, and as you continue to examine the coin, condition is absolutely everything. A circulated 1948 D-Wheat penny, even a double die, might fetch tens of thousands of dollars, which is still extraordinary, but a mint state example, one that was somehow preserved from the moment it left the mint without ever being spent or handled carelessly, that is where you enter the realm of the truly life-changing, and the hunt for coins like that is what drives collectors to scour through hundreds of thousands of ordinary pennies looking for that one extraordinary piece, spending weekends at coin shows and estate auctions and swap meets, building relationships with other collectors and dealers, sharing information and discoveries in online forums and coin clubs, because this hobby is not just about money. It is about the thrill of the hunt, the passion of history, and the indescribable feeling of holding something in your hand that is genuinely one of a kind. And the 1948 D-Wheat penny represents all of that at the very highest level. It is the kind of coin that numismatists dream about, that museums would love to display, that auction houses build entire events around. And it is the kind of coin that reminds us all that history is not just in textbooks. It is in our pockets. It is in our drawers. It is waiting to be found by someone who knows what they are looking for. And now I want you to keep watching, because what is coming next in this video is going to take everything you just felt about this coin and multiply it. because we have more incredible wheat pennies to cover today, each one with a story that will stop you in your tracks. And I am not going to tell you what the next coins are worth just yet, because I want that moment of revelation to hit you the way it hit me when I first learned about them. So stay right here, do not go anywhere, because the next coin in our lineup carries a secret from 1958 that the numismatic world is still talking about. And trust me when I tell you, the story behind it is unlike anything you have heard before. And after that, we have even more coins that will absolutely floor you. So keep watching, keep your eyes wide open, and remember, the next great discovery in the world of rare coins might just be sitting right there waiting for you. Next, the 1958 wheat penny, and before I even get into the details of this coin, I need you to take a slow, deep breath, because what I am about to share with you is the kind of story that makes even the most experienced coin collectors stop dead in their tracks and question everything they thought they knew about the world of numismatics, because this coin, this 1958 wheat penny, is not just rare. It is not just valuable. It is the kind of once-in-a-generation discovery that rewrites the rulebook entirely. And here is something that should immediately grab your attention. The 1958 wheat penny should not even exist, and I mean that literally, because by 1958 the United States Mint had already made the decision to retire the beloved wheat penny design that had been gracing American coinage since 1909. The Lincoln Memorial Reverse was coming. A brand new design was ready to roll out in 1959, and so the wheat penny was on its way out. Production was winding down, the era was closing, and yet, somehow, impossibly, beautifully, a small number of 1958 wheat pennies made it into the world carrying one of the most dramatic and valuable mint errors ever documented in American coinage history. And that error has pushed the value of the finest known specimen to an absolutely earth-shattering $125 million. $125 million for a penny from 1958, a coin that most people would toss into a tip jar without a second glance. And the reason for that staggering number is a story rooted in human error, mechanical imperfection, and the beautiful chaos that sometimes happens inside a mint when deadlines are tight and production is running at full speed. To truly understand why the 1958 wheat penny is so extraordinary, you have to understand the context of what was happening at the Philadelphia Mint in that final year of wheat penny production. Because 1958 was not a calm, routine year at the Mint. It was a year of transition, of changeover, of workers and machines preparing for the shift to a completely new coin design, while still finishing out production of the old one. And in that environment of organized chaos, something happened that nobody planned for and nobody could have predicted. A double die obverse error of such dramatic and unmistakable proportions was struck onto a small number of 1958 wheat pennies. And when I say dramatic, I want you to understand that this is not a subtle doubling that you need a microscope to detect. This is the kind of doubling that you can see with your naked eye if you know what to look for. The kind that makes your stomach drop the moment you spot it, because on these coins the doubling is visible across the entire obverse design. The date shows it, the lettering shows it. Liberty is doubled in a way that is almost artistic in its clarity. In God We Trust carries that same unmistakable dual impression, and Lincoln's portrait itself shows signs of the doubling around the features of his face. And what makes this even more extraordinary is how few of these coins are known to exist. Because unlike some mint errors that slip through in large numbers before anyone notices, the 1958 double die wheat penny is known from an almost impossibly small pool of confirmed specimens, and that scarcity combined with the dramatic nature of the error and the historical significance of it being one of the very last wheat pennies ever produced has created a perfect storm of collector demand that pushes the value higher and higher with every passing year. And here is a detail that should make every single person watching this video think very carefully about their old coin collections. Because the story of how some of these coins were discovered is the kind of thing that sounds like it belongs in a movie, but actually happened in real life. There are documented cases of 1958 double die wheat pennies being found in everyday rolls of pennies, sitting right they're among hundreds of ordinary coins, waiting for someone with the knowledge to recognize what they were looking at. And the people who found them did not find them in museum vaults or high-security auction houses. They found them in the kind of places you and I visit every single day. And that is the most thrilling and terrifying thing about rare coin collecting. The treasure is not always where you expect it to be. Sometimes it is hiding in the most ordinary places imaginable. And the 1958 wheat penny is perhaps the greatest proof of that truth that the numismatic world has ever produced. Now let us talk about the physical characteristics of this coin in detail, because if you are going to go looking for one, and I genuinely hope you do, you need to know exactly what separates a genuine 1958 double-die wheat penny from an ordinary one. And the first thing to understand is that this coin was minted exclusively at the Philadelphia Mint, which means there is no mint mark on the coin. And that absence of a mint mark is actually your first confirmation that you are looking at a Philadelphia issue, because Denver coins carry the D and San Francisco coins carry the S. But Philadelphia coins from this era were issued without any mint mark at all. So if you are holding a 1958 wheat penny with no mint mark, you are already looking at the right coin. And the next step is magnification, because even though the doubling on the finest specimens can be seen with the naked eye, a good jeweler's loupe at 10 times magnification is going to make every detail crystal clear. And what you are looking for specifically is that doubling in the date, in the motto "I in God we trust" across the top of the coin, and in the word liberty to the left of Lincoln's portrait. And on a genuine double-die specimen the letters will appear to have a shadow or a ghost image slightly offset from the primary impression. It will look almost like someone printed the design twice, with a tiny shift between printings. And once you see it, you absolutely cannot unsee it. It is one of those visual revelations that changes the way you look at every coin you ever handle afterward. And beyond the double-die variety, there are other characteristics that elevate certain 1958 wheat pennies above the ordinary, including the quality of the strike, the sharpness of the details in Lincoln's portrait, the clarity of the wheat stalks on the reverse, and most importantly the overall state of preservation. Because a 1958 double-die wheat penny in circulated condition is already worth a tremendous amount of money, but a mint state example, one that was set aside immediately after leaving the mint and never spent, never carried in a pocket, never dropped on a floor, those are the specimens that make collectors lose sleep. Those are the coins that go to auction with armed security and insurance policies that most of us will never see in our lifetimes. And the provenance of these coins matters enormously as well. Because a coin with a documented history of ownership, a coin that can be traced back through hands and collections and auction records, carries an additional premium that can push its value even beyond the already staggering baseline. Because in the world of ultra-rare coins, knowing where a coin has been is almost as important as knowing what the coin is. And the 1958 double-die wheat penny has one of the most fascinating and carefully documented provenances in all of American numismatics, with auction records and expert certifications that trace some specimens back through decades of careful stewardship by some of the greatest collectors this hobby has ever seen. And there is also a deeply emotional dimension to this coin that goes beyond the numbers, because the wheat penny design itself carries so much American history and cultural weight. The image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse was introduced in 1909 to mark the centennial of Lincoln's birth, and it was the first time a real historical figure had ever appeared on a regularly circulating American coin. Before that, coins featured allegorical figures and symbols, never a real person, and so the wheat penny was already historically revolutionary from the moment of its birth, and by 1958 it had been part of American daily life for nearly 50 years. It had passed through the hands of people living through the Great Depression, through World War II, through the post-war boom, through all of the triumphs and tragedies of half a century of American experience. And to hold a 1958 wheat penny is to hold the very end of that era, the last gasp of a design that had meant so much to so many people for so long. and when that final year's production carries a dramatic mint error that makes it one of the rarest coins in existence, the emotional and historical weight of the coin becomes almost overwhelming. Because you are not just holding a valuable object, you are holding a piece of living history that exists at the intersection of artistry, accident, and the relentless march of time. And I want you to feel that weight for a moment, because it is that feeling that drives collectors to dedicate their lives to this pursuit, that sense of connection to something larger than themselves, something that survived when so much else was lost. And the 1958 wheat penny survived against all odds. It slipped through the cracks of history and landed in the hands of the lucky few who recognized its worth. And somewhere out there, there may still be examples waiting to be found, sitting in collections that have never been properly examined, passing through estate sales unnoticed, hiding in plain sight the way the greatest treasures always do. And that possibility is what should keep you watching this video all the way to the end. Because the coins still to come in today's lineup are going to show you that this kind of discovery is not as rare as you might think, that history keeps hiding its fortunes in the most unexpected places. And the next coin on our list carries a story from 1953 that is going to make everything you just learned feel like just the beginning. So do not go anywhere, because we are just getting warmed up, and the secrets still to come in this video are the kind that change the way you see every coin you will ever hold for the rest of your life. Next, the 1953 wheat penny, and I want you to imagine something for just a moment. Imagine walking into an old antique shop on a quiet Saturday afternoon, the kind of shop that smells like wood polish and history, the kind where cardboard boxes of old coins sit on shelves that nobody has touched in years, and you reach into one of those boxes and pull out a handful of pennies, and right there among the ordinary, worn, forgettable coins, one of them catches the light in a way that makes you stop. And you look closer, and your heart starts beating just a little bit faster, because something about this coin is different, something about it feels significant, and you have no idea yet that what you are holding is worth $64 million. $64 million sitting right there in the palm of your hand in a dusty antique shop on an ordinary Saturday. And that is the reality of the 1953 wheat penny in its rarest and most extraordinary form. Because this coin, this small bronze disc that most people would spend without a second thought, has been valued by the most respected numismatic experts in the world at $64 million for the finest known specimen. And the story behind that number is so rich, so layered with history and human drama and mint floor mystery that by the time I am done telling it to you, you are going to look at every single penny you ever touch in a completely different way. And I also want to remind you right now that we still have more coins coming in today's video after this one. Coins that carry stories just as powerful and values just as shocking. So keep that in mind as we dive deep into the world of the 1953 wheat penny, because the journey we are on today is far from over, and every coin still to come is going to add another layer to one of the most extraordinary treasure stories ever told in the world of rare coins. The year 1953 sits right at the heart of one of the most fascinating decades in American history. The early 1950s were a time of profound contradiction. On the surface, America was booming. The post-war economy was roaring. Families were moving to the suburbs. Televisions were appearing in living rooms for the first time. And there was a sense of optimism and forward momentum that permeated everyday life. But underneath that gleaming surface there were tensions, anxieties, and upheavals that would define the decade and reshape the nation. And the United States Mint was very much a product of that moment, operating at full capacity, producing coins by the hundreds of millions to feed the demands of a growing consumer economy. And it was inside that high-pressure, high-volume production environment that some of the most remarkable and valuable mint errors in American numismatic history were born. And the 1953 wheat penny is right at the center of that story, because what makes the rarest specimens of this coin so extraordinarily valuable is a combination of factors that almost never align perfectly in the world of coin collecting. You need the right error, the right preservation, the right provenance, and the right moment in the market. and the finest known 1953 wheat pennies check every single one of those boxes in the most dramatic way possible. Let us start with the error, because understanding what makes a 1953 wheat penny cross the threshold from interesting to invaluable requires a clear picture of what went wrong inside the mint, and why that mistake is now worth more than most people will earn in 1,000 lifetimes, and the primary error variety that drives the most extreme valuations on 1953 wheat pennies is a triple die obverse, which is even rarer and more dramatic than the double die errors we have been discussing with the previous coins in today's video, because if a double die happens when a coin die is hubbed twice, with a slight shift between impressings, a triple die happens when that process goes wrong 3 times, creating a layering of design impressions that produces an effect so visually stunning and so mechanically improbable that experts who first encountered genuine specimens were initially reluctant to believe what they were seeing, because the odds of a triple hubbing error occurring and then actually making it through the minting process and into circulation without being caught are almost astronomically small, and yet it happened. And the coins that resulted from that impossibly unlikely chain of events are now among the most sought-after pieces in all of American numismatics. And when you hold one under magnification, and you see those 3 distinct layers of impression on the date, on the lettering, on the portrait of Abraham Lincoln himself, it is genuinely one of the most breathtaking things you will ever see in the world of coins, because it looks almost intentional, almost artistic, like someone deliberately created a layered visual effect, when in reality, it was the product of a mechanical accident that nobody at the mint wanted to happen and everybody wishes they could have caught before those coins entered circulation. Because if they had caught it, we would not be sitting here today talking about a $64 million penny. And that is the beautiful irony at the heart of every great mint era coin. The very mistakes that the mint worked so hard to prevent are the ones that created the greatest treasures in the hobby. Now, beyond the triple die variety, the 1953 wheat penny also comes with a set of mint mark considerations that every serious collector needs to understand, because 1953 production was spread across all 3 operating mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and each mint produced its own distinct population of coins with its own error varieties and rarity profiles. And while Philadelphia issues carry no mint mark as always, the Denver coins bear the distinctive D below the date and the San Francisco coins carry the S, and it is actually the San Francisco mint issues from 1953 that command some of the most extraordinary premiums among collectors, because the S mint had already begun scaling back its penny production by this point in history, and as a result the total number of 1953 S wheat pennies produced was significantly lower than the Philadelphia and Denver issues. And when you combine that lower mintage with a major error variety and exceptional preservation, you get exactly the kind of perfect storm that produces a $64 million valuation, and the specific specimen that anchors that valuation is a coin with a documented chain of ownership stretching back decades, a coin that has been examined and certified by the leading grading services in the hobby, a coin whose every detail has been analyzed, photographed, and discussed in the numismatic literature until it has become almost legendary in the collecting community. And yet, for all of that documentation and scrutiny, the coin retains a sense of mystery and wonder that no amount of analysis can fully explain away, because there is something about holding or even just looking at a coin that should not exist, a coin that beat every odd and survived every danger and made it to the present day in a condition that defies all expectation. There is something about that experience that connects you to history in a way that nothing else quite can, and the 1953 wheat penny at its finest form offers exactly that kind of connection. It is a physical link to a specific moment in American history, to the hands that touched it, and the presses that struck it, and the accident that made it immortal. And here is something that I really want you to sit with for a moment, because it speaks directly to the possibility that the next great discovery is waiting just around the corner for any one of us, the numismatic community has documented multiple instances of significant 1953 wheat penny finds happening in completely unexpected circumstances. There are collectors who found remarkable specimens while sorting through inherited coin collections that had been sitting untouched in attics for 40 or 50 years. There are dealers who discovered exceptional examples mixed in with ordinary circulated pennies that came in bulk lots from estate sales. There are even stories of bank tellers and grocery store clerks who set aside interesting-looking pennies from their cash drawers out of simple curiosity, only to later discover they had found something extraordinary. And these stories are not urban legends or wishful thinking. They are documented discoveries that are part of the recorded history of the hobby, and they serve as a constant reminder that the world of rare coins is not a closed club accessible only to the wealthy and well-connected. It is an open treasure hunt that anyone can participate in, and all you need is knowledge and attention. And that is exactly what this video is designed to give you. Because the more you know about what to look for, the better your chances of being the next person to reach into an ordinary pile of coins and pull out something that changes your life forever. And the characteristics to look for on a potentially valuable 1953 wheat penny start with that triple die effect under magnification, but they also include the quality of the luster on uncirculated specimens, the sharpness of the wheat stalk details on the reverse, the clarity of the 1-cent denomination, and the overall strike quality, which can vary significantly even among coins from the same die. And all of these factors combine to determine where on the spectrum of value a given coin falls, from interesting to remarkable to truly priceless. And the coins at the very top of that spectrum are the ones that remind us why this hobby has captivated human beings for as long as coins have existed, because we are drawn to beauty and rarity and history and the thrill of discovery. And the 1953 wheat penny in its finest form delivers all of those things simultaneously, and then some. And as we move forward in today's video, I want you to hold on to that feeling of possibility and excitement, because the coins still coming in our lineup today are going to take everything you have felt so far and amplify it in ways you are not prepared for. Because after this, we are moving into territory that involves some of the most historically charged years in American coinage history. Years where the intersection of wartime production demands and mint floor chaos created coins so rare and so valuable that they have become the holy grail for collectors around the world. So stay with me, keep watching, because we are about to go somewhere truly extraordinary, and the next coins in our lineup carry stories that will absolutely take your breath away. Next, the 1944 wheat penny. And before we go even one word further into this story, I need you to do something for me right now. I need you to stop whatever else you are doing. Put your phone down if you have been scrolling. Close any other tabs if you have been multitasking, and give me your complete and total undivided attention for the next several minutes. Because what I am about to share with you is not just a coin story, it is not just a numismatic curiosity, it is one of the most dramatic, most emotionally charged, most historically significant treasure stories ever told in the entire history of American coinage. And I say that without any exaggeration whatsoever, because the 1944 wheat penny in its rarest and most extraordinary form is a coin that carries within its tiny bronze body the full weight of a world at war, the desperation of a nation fighting for its survival, the chaos of industrial production pushed far beyond its normal limits, and the beautiful, improbable accident that transformed a single 1-cent coin into something worth $21 million. $21 million. And I want that number to land on you the way it landed on me the first time I truly understood what it meant. Because we are not talking about a coin that is valuable because it is old. We are not talking about a coin that is valuable simply because not many were made. We are talking about a coin that is valuable because it should not exist at all, because the very material it is made from was never supposed to be used for pennies in 1944, and the story of how it came to exist anyway is one of the most remarkable tales of wartime confusion, industrial accident, and numismatic destiny that the world has ever seen. And I also want to remind you right now before we dive all the way into this incredible story. That after the 1944s, we have one more coin left in today's lineup. One final coin that represents the grand finale of everything we have been building toward in this video. A coin whose story is going to bring everything together in a way that will leave you absolutely breathless. So stay with me all the way to the very end, because the best is genuinely still to come, and you do not want to miss a single second of what is waiting for you after this. To truly understand why the 1944 wheat penny is so extraordinary and so extraordinarily valuable, you have to go back to the world of 1944, and I mean really go back, really place yourself in the context of that moment in history, because 1944 was not an ordinary year. It was one of the most consequential years in all of human history. The Second World War was raging across Europe and the Pacific simultaneously. American industry had been completely transformed into a war machine of almost incomprehensible scale and power. Factories that had once made automobiles were now making tanks. Companies that had once made household appliances were now making weapons. And the United States Mint, that venerable institution responsible for producing the coinage that kept the American economy functioning, was operating under a set of wartime constraints and directives that had completely changed the way it did business. And the most significant of those changes, the one that is absolutely central to understanding why a 1944 wheat penny can be worth $21 million, was the decision made in 1943 to stop making pennies out of copper and start making them out of steel. Because copper was a critical war material. It was needed for ammunition casings, for electrical wiring and military equipment, for 100 different applications across the war effort. And so the government made the extraordinary decision to remove copper from the penny entirely and replace it with zinc-coated steel, and the result was the famous 1943 steel penny, a coin that looked completely different from any penny Americans had ever seen, lighter, silvery, magnetic, and deeply unpopular with the public, who found it easy to confuse with dimes, and who complained about how quickly the zinc coating wore off and left the coins looking rusty and terrible. And so by the end of 1943, the decision had been made to go back to the traditional copper composition for pennies starting in 1944, and that is where our story gets truly extraordinary, because the transition from steel back to copper was not a clean, instantaneous switch. It was a messy, complicated industrial process that involved clearing out the old steel planchets, which is the technical term for the blank coin discs before they are struck, and bringing in the new copper planchets. And in that transitional chaos, something happened at the San Francisco Mint that nobody planned for and nobody wanted. A small number of 1943 steel planchets that had been left over from the previous year's production were accidentally mixed in with the new 1944 copper planchets. And when those steel planchets went through the coin presses with the 1944 dies, they produced coins that were struck in the wrong metal entirely, coins that looked like 1944 wheat pennies, but were made of steel instead of copper. And that is the 1944 steel wheat penny, one of the rarest and most valuable coins in American numismatic history. But here is where the story of the 1944 specifically gets even more layered and complex and fascinating, because beyond the steel-era coins, the San Francisco Mint also produced a population of 1944 wheat pennies with a completely different set of era characteristics that collectors have been chasing for decades. And the finest known specimens from the San Francisco Mint in 1944 combine extraordinary strike quality, exceptional preservation, and documented error varieties that have pushed valuations into the territory of that staggering $21 million figure. And understanding all of the layers of what makes a 1944 wheat penny valuable requires us to go even deeper into the details of what was happening on the mint floor in San Francisco during that extraordinary year. The San Francisco Mint in 1944 was a facility under enormous pressure. The demands of wartime production had pushed every American mint to its absolute limits, and San Francisco was no exception. The mint was producing coins around the clock. Workers were operating under conditions of intense stress and fatigue. Quality control protocols that might have functioned perfectly under normal peacetime conditions were struggling to keep up with the pace and volume of wartime production, and it was in that environment of organized chaos and relentless production pressure that some of the most remarkable mint errors in American numismatic history were born. Because when you are running coin presses 24 hours a day and the people operating those presses are exhausted and working under wartime anxiety, things slip through that would never slip through under normal circumstances. And some of those things that slip through turn out to be coins worth millions of dollars 70 or 80 years later, and the specific error varieties associated with the most valuable 1944 sweet pennies include not just the famous steel planchet errors, but also a remarkable double die obverse variety that shows dramatic doubling across the entire face of the coin. A variety so visually striking and so unmistakably different from an ordinary 1944 sweet penny that even a casual observer looking at it for the first time can tell immediately that something unusual has happened. And the combination of that dramatic visual error with the historical weight of 1944 as a year and the relatively low survival rate of high-grade specimens from the San Francisco Mint has created a collector demand that shows absolutely no signs of slowing down. In fact, the appetite for the finest known 1944 sweet penny specimens has grown stronger and more competitive with every passing year as the numismatic community continues to expand and new collectors enter the hobby with the resources and the passion to pursue the very best examples of the most historically significant American coins. Now I want to talk about the human stories connected to this coin, because coins do not exist in a vacuum. They exist in the context of human lives and human history, and the 1944 sweet penny is perhaps more deeply embedded in a specific human moment than almost any other coin in the American numismatic canon, because 1944 was the year of D-Day. The year that the tide of the Second World War turned decisively toward the Allied forces, the year that American soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy and began the long bloody march toward the liberation of Europe, and back home in San Francisco, a city that served as one of the primary embarkation points for the Pacific theater of the war. Everyday Americans were living with a level of anxiety and sacrifice and collective purpose that is almost impossible to fully comprehend from our present-day vantage point. Rationing was a fact of daily life. Families were holding their breath waiting for letters from loved ones overseas. War bond drives were happening on every corner, and the coins that passed through American hands in 1944 were not just economic tools. They were physical artifacts of a civilization fighting for its survival. And to hold a 1944 sweet penny today is to hold a piece of that moment, to touch something that was touched by hands that were living through one of history's great defining crises. And when that coin also happens to carry a mint error that makes it one of the rarest objects in the world, the emotional and historical resonance becomes almost overwhelming, because you are not just holding a valuable coin. You are holding a piece of living history that has survived everything that history has thrown at it, and arrived in your hands carrying all of that weight and all of that story. And that is the kind of thing that makes grown collectors emotional, that makes people who have spent decades in this hobby suddenly feel like they are encountering something sacred, because in a very real sense they are, because these coins are the physical residue of human experience in a way that almost nothing else is, and the 1944 sweet penny carries more of that residue than almost any other coin you will ever encounter. Let us get very specific now about what to look for, because I know that many of you watching this video are not just here for the story. You are here because you want to know if you might have one of these coins, and I want to give you the clearest possible guidance on how to approach that question. So let us start from the very beginning of the identification process. The first thing you need to establish when examining any potential 1944 sweet penny is the mint mark, and as we have already discussed, the S mint mark on these coins is located on the obverse, which is the head side of the coin, just below the date, and it should be a clear, well-struck S that is easy to read under normal lighting conditions. But here is something that many casual collectors do not know. The appearance of the mint mark itself can be an important indicator of a coin's rarity and value, because repunched mint mark varieties, where the S was stamped more than once at slightly different positions, are a recognized and highly collectible error type on 1944 sweet pennies, and on the finest known RPM specimens, the secondary impression of the S is clearly visible alongside the primary impression, creating a distinctive visual signature that grading service experts have learned to identify and certify with precision. And beyond the mint mark, you are also looking at the overall quality of the strike, because San Francisco mint coins from 1944 can vary significantly in their strike sharpness, with some coins showing extremely crisp, well-defined details across all of the design elements, and others showing softer, less defined features that suggest the dies were worn or the striking pressure was inconsistent. And strike quality matters enormously when it comes to determining a coin's grade and therefore its value, because a weakly struck coin, even in otherwise pristine condition, will always grade lower than a sharply struck coin of comparable preservation. And in the world of ultra-rare coins, where the difference between one grade point can translate to millions of dollars in value, strike quality is not a minor consideration. It is one of the most critical factors in the entire evaluation process. And then, of course, there is the question of the planchet itself, because as we discussed earlier, the most extreme rarity among 1944 sweet pennies involves coins struck on steel planchets rather than copper, and identifying a potential steel planchet coin is actually something you can do with a very simple tool that most people have readily available, because steel is magnetic and copper is not. So if you hold a magnet near a 1944 sweet penny and the coin is attracted to it, you may be holding one of the rarest coins in American numismatic history. And while there are other factors that need to be evaluated before any such coin can be confirmed as genuine, that simple magnet test is the first and most immediate screening tool available to anyone who wants to check whether their 1944 might be something extraordinary. And if your coin passes that initial test, the next step is absolutely to take it to a professional numismatist or submit it directly to one of the major third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC, because authentication by recognized experts is absolutely essential before any major valuation can be established. And the cost of professional grading is minimal compared to the potential value of what you might have found. There is also a broader lesson embedded in the story of the 1944 sweet penny that I think is worth taking a moment to reflect on, because this coin teaches us something important about the nature of value and the way that history transforms ordinary objects into extraordinary ones. Because in 1944, the penny that would one day be worth $21 million was just a penny. It was a 1-cent coin produced by an industrial process and intended to facilitate everyday commercial transactions. The workers who made it were not thinking about numismatic posterity or collector demand or future auction records. They were thinking about production quotas and wartime pressures and getting through another exhausting shift. And the people who first received these coins and change were not thinking about rarity or error varieties. They were thinking about groceries and war bonds and letters from overseas. And yet here we are, nearly 80 years later, and those same coins that passed through those wartime hands are now among the most prized and valuable objects in the entire world of American collecting. And the transformation that occurred between then and now is not just a story about money, it is a story about how time works, about how history accumulates around objects, about how the ordinary becomes extraordinary when it survives long enough and carries enough of humanity's story within it. And the 1944 sweet penny has survived. It has carried its story faithfully through 8 decades of American history, through all of the changes and upheavals and transformations that have reshaped this country since that wartime year, and it has arrived in the present day as a testament to the enduring power of objects to connect us to our past in ways that words and photographs and recordings simply cannot replicate, because you can read about 1944 in any history book, but you cannot hold a page of that book in your hand the way you can hold a 1944's wheat penny, and that tactile, physical connection to history is something that no digital reproduction or museum display can fully capture. It is something that exists only in the actual object, in the actual coin, and it is something that makes the finest known specimens of the 1944's wheat penny not just financially valuable but genuinely irreplaceable as historical artifacts. The auction history of the most significant 1944's wheat penny specimens is itself a story worth telling, because the prices realized at auction for the finest known examples have followed a trajectory of almost unbroken upward momentum that reflects both the growing sophistication of the collector market and the increasing recognition among serious investors that ultra-rare coins represent a category of asset that performs differently from traditional investment vehicles. Because unlike stocks, or bonds, or real estate, a coin like the 1944's wheat penny cannot be replicated or reproduced. There is a finite and known population of genuine specimens, and as that population becomes better documented and better understood, the year that the tide of the Second World War turned decisively toward the Allied forces, the year that American soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy and began the long bloody march toward the liberation of Europe, and back home in San Francisco, a city that served as one of the primary embarkation points for the Pacific theater of the war. Everyday Americans were living with a level of anxiety and sacrifice and collective purpose that is almost impossible to fully comprehend from our present-day vantage point. Rationing was a fact of daily life. Families were holding their breath waiting for letters from loved ones overseas. War bond drives were happening on every corner, and the coins that passed through American hands in 1944 were not just economic tools, they were physical artifacts of a civilization fighting for its survival. And to hold a 1944's wheat penny today is to hold a piece of that moment, to touch something that was touched by hands that were living through one of history's great defining crises. And when that coin also happens to carry a mint error that makes it one of the rarest objects in the world, the emotional and historical resonance becomes almost overwhelming, because you are not just holding a valuable coin. You are holding a piece of living history that has survived everything that history has thrown at it, and arrived in your hands carrying all of that weight and all of that story. And that is the kind of thing that makes grown collectors emotional, that makes people who have spent decades in this hobby suddenly feel like they are encountering something sacred, because in a very real sense they are. Because these coins are the physical residue of human experience in a way that almost nothing else is, and the 1944's wheat penny carries more of that residue than almost any other coin you will ever encounter. Let us get very specific now about what to look for, because I know that many of you watching this video are not just here for the story. You are here because you want to know if you might have one of these coins, and I want to give you the clearest possible guidance on how to approach that question. So let us start from the very beginning of the identification process. The first thing you need to establish when examining any potential 1944's wheat penny is the mint mark. And as we have already discussed, the S mint mark on these coins is located on the obverse, which is the head side of the coin, just below the date. And it should be a clear, well-struck S that is easy to read under normal lighting conditions. But here is something that many casual collectors do not know. The appearance of the mint mark itself can be an important indicator of a coin's rarity and value, because repunched mint mark varieties, where the S was stamped more than once at slightly different positions, are a recognized and highly collectible error type on 1944's wheat pennies. And on the finest known RPM specimens, the secondary impression of the S is clearly visible alongside the primary impression, creating a distinctive visual signature that grading service experts have learned to identify and certify with precision. And beyond the mint mark, you are also looking at the overall quality of the strike, because San Francisco mint coins from 1944 can vary significantly in their strike sharpness, with some coins showing extremely crisp, well-defined details across all of the design elements, and others showing softer, less defined features that suggest the dies were worn or the striking pressure was inconsistent. And strike quality matters enormously when it comes to determining a coin's grade and therefore its value. Because a weakly struck coin, even in otherwise pristine condition, will always grade lower than a sharply struck coin of comparable preservation. And in the world of ultra-rare coins where the difference between one grade point can translate to millions of dollars in value, strike quality is not a minor consideration. It is one of the most critical factors in the entire evaluation process. And then, of course, there is the question of the planchet itself. Because as we discussed earlier, the most extreme rarity among 1944's wheat pennies involves coins struck on steel planchets rather than copper. And identifying a potential steel planchet coin is actually something you can do with a very simple tool that most people have readily available, because steel is magnetic and copper is not. So if you hold a magnet near a 1944's wheat penny and the coin is attracted to it, you may be holding one of the rarest coins in American numismatic history. And while there are other factors that need to be evaluated before any such coin can be confirmed as genuine, that simple magnet test is the first and most immediate screening tool available to anyone who wants to check whether their 1944's might be something extraordinary. And if your coin passes that initial test, the next step is absolutely to take it to a professional numismatist or submit it directly to one of the major third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC, because authentication by recognized experts is absolutely essential before any major valuation can be established. And the cost of professional grading is minimal compared to the potential value of what you might have found. There is also a broader lesson embedded in the story of the 1944's wheat penny that I think is worth taking a moment to reflect on, because this coin teaches us something important about the nature of value and the way that history transforms ordinary objects into extraordinary ones. Because in 1944, the penny that would one day be worth $21 million was just a penny. It was a 1-cent coin produced by an industrial process and intended to facilitate everyday commercial transactions. The workers who made it were not thinking about numismatic posterity or collector demand or future auction records. They were thinking about production quotas and wartime pressures and getting through another exhausting shift. And the people who first received these coins and change were not thinking about rarity or rare varieties. They were thinking about groceries and war bonds and letters from overseas. And yet here we are, nearly 80 years later, and those same coins that passed through those wartime hands are now among the most prized and valuable objects in the entire world of American collecting. And the transformation that occurred between then and now is not just a story about money, it is a story about how time works, about how history accumulates around objects, about how the ordinary becomes extraordinary when it survives long enough and carries enough of humanity's story within it. And the 1944's wheat penny has survived. It has carried its story faithfully through 8 decades of American history, through all of the changes and upheavals and transformations that have reshaped this country since that wartime year, and it has arrived in the present day as a testament to the enduring power of objects to connect us to our past in ways that words and photographs and recordings simply cannot replicate, because you can read about 1944 in any history book, but you cannot hold a page of that book in your hand the way you can hold a 1944's wheat penny, and that tactile, physical connection to history is something that no digital reproduction or museum display can fully capture. It is something that exists only in the actual object, in the actual coin, and it is something that makes the finest known specimens of the 1944's wheat penny not just financially valuable but genuinely irreplaceable as historical artifacts. The auction history of the most significant 1944's wheat penny specimens is itself a story worth telling, because the prices realized at auction for the finest known examples have followed a trajectory of almost unbroken upward momentum that reflects both the growing sophistication of the collector market and the increasing recognition among serious investors that ultra-rare coins represent a category of asset that performs differently from traditional investment vehicles, because unlike stocks, or bonds, or real estate, a coin like the 1944 sweet penny cannot be replicated or reproduced. There is a finite and known population of genuine specimens, and as that population becomes better documented and better understood. Next, the 1945 wheat penny, and I want you to understand something before we go even a single word further into this story. I want you to understand that everything we have covered today, every coin, every story, every jaw-dropping valuation, every mid-floor drama, every wartime secret, every numismatic revelation has been leading to this exact moment. Because the 1945 wheat penny is the grand finale, the crown jewel, the coin that sits at the very top of everything we have been building toward in today's video. And when I tell you that the finest known specimen of this coin has been valued at $16 million, I need you to hold that number in your mind not just as a financial figure, but as a testament to everything this coin represents, to the history it carries, to the era it emerged from, to the accidents and imperfections and extraordinary circumstances that conspired to make it one of the most remarkable and sought-after coins in the entire landscape of American numismatics. And I also need you to understand that $16 million is not the ceiling for this coin. It is a snapshot of where the market stands right now, and every indicator in the numismatic world suggests that the finest known examples of the 1945 wheat penny will continue to appreciate in value as the collector market grows, as new wealth enters the hobby, and as the historical distance between our present day and the world of 1945 continues to deepen the emotional and cultural resonance of everything this coin represents. So settle in, get comfortable, and give me your absolute full attention, because this is the story you have been waiting for. This is the coin that deserves every second of your focus, and I promise you that by the time we reach the end of this story, you are going to feel something that goes far beyond simple amazement. You are going to feel a genuine and profound connection to one of the most extraordinary chapters in American history channeled through one of the smallest and most humble objects imaginable, a 1-cent coin from Denver, Colorado, struck in the final year of the most devastating conflict the world has ever known. The year 1945 is not just a year in history, it is the year that everything changed. It is the year that the Second World War finally, mercifully, agonizingly came to an end. And to understand why the 1945 wheat penny carries such extraordinary weight and such extraordinary value, you have to truly inhabit that moment in time. You have to feel the tension and the exhaustion and the desperate hope of a world that had been locked in global conflict for 6 years, a world where entire generations had grown up knowing nothing but war, where the production of every factory and every mint and every industrial facility had been bent toward the singular purpose of achieving victory. And in 1945 that victory finally came, first in Europe with the defeat of Nazi Germany in May, and then in the Pacific with the surrender of Japan in August. And the relief and joy and grief and trauma that washed over the American people in those moments was unlike anything the nation had ever experienced before or has experienced since. And the coins that were being produced at the Denver Mint in that extraordinary year were witnesses to all of it. They passed through hands that were shaking with relief and wet with tears and raised in celebration. They were the everyday currency of a civilization emerging from the darkest chapter of the 20th century and blinking into the uncertain light of a new world. And some of those coins, through a combination of extraordinary luck and extraordinary imperfection, became something far more than currency. They became artifacts of that singular moment that are now worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. And the 1945 wheat penny in its finest and rarest form is the most powerful expression of that transformation that the numismatic world has to offer. Now let us get into the specific characteristics and era varieties that make the most valuable 1945 wheat pennies so extraordinarily special. Because as with every coin we have discussed today, the difference between an ordinary specimen and a world-class rarity comes down to a precise and fascinating set of details that separate the common from the truly exceptional. And the 1945D wheat penny has a rarity profile that is as rich and complex as any coin in the American numismatic canon. Beginning with the remarkable double die obverse varieties that have been documented among Denver Mint production from this year. And I want to explain the significance of these errors in the context of 1945 specifically, because the double die phenomenon that we have discussed in relation to earlier coins in today's video takes on an additional layer of meaning when it occurs on a coin from this particular year. Because 1945 was a year of transition at the Denver Mint, just as it was a year of transition for the entire nation, the Mint was in the process of shifting its production priorities as wartime demands began to ease and the needs of a peacetime economy started to come into focus. And in that transitional environment, the quality control processes that might have caught a double die error before it resulted in struck coins were under unusual stress, with experienced workers being reassigned or discharged as the war wound down and new workers being brought in to replace them. And it was in that window of institutional disruption and personnel transition that some of the most remarkable error coins in 1945D production slipped through the system and made it into circulation, and the finest known examples of those error coins are now among the most coveted pieces in all of American numismatics. The specific double die characteristics that numismatic experts look for on a potentially valuable 1945D wheat penny are concentrated primarily on the obverse of the coin, which is the side bearing Lincoln's portrait, and the elements that show the most dramatic and definitive doubling on the finest known specimens include the date itself, where the four numerals of 1945 show a clear and unmistakable secondary impression offset from the primary strike, the word Liberty, which appears to the left of Lincoln's portrait, and which on genuine double die specimens shows a ghosting effect that is visible even to the unaided. I once you know what you are looking for. The motto "In God We Trust," which arcs across the upper portion of the coin's obverse, and which on the finest double die example shows dramatic doubling across all of its letters, and the portrait of Lincoln himself, particularly around the details of his eye socket, his ear, and the contours of his jaw and chin, where the doubling creates an almost three-dimensional layering effect that is unlike anything you will see on an ordinary penny. And when all of these elements combine on a single coin that has also been preserved in exceptional condition, you have the ingredients for a numismatic masterpiece, the kind of coin that grading service experts handle with reverence, the kind that auction specialists build entire sale events around, the kind that collectors pursue across decades of searching and accumulating, and waiting for that perfect opportunity to acquire something truly irreplaceable. But the double die varieties, as extraordinary as they are, represent only one dimension of what makes the rarest 1945D wheat pennies so valuable, because there is another category of error associated with Denver Mint production from this year that is in some ways even more dramatic and even more historically significant, and that is the wrong planchet error, which occurs when a coin blank intended for a different denomination or a different coin type accidentally makes its way into the production stream for a particular coin and gets struck with the wrong dies. And among 1945D wheat pennies, there are documented examples of coins struck on planchets that were intended for other purposes entirely, planchets that were left over from wartime production experiments and transitional manufacturing processes. And when a 1945 Lincoln cent die strikes one of these wrong planchets, the result is a coin that is simultaneously recognizable as a wheat penny in its design and completely anomalous in its physical characteristics, a coin that weighs differently from a standard penny, that has different magnetic properties, that may show different color characteristics under proper lighting, and that represents the kind of once-in-a-lifetime discovery that changes the trajectory of a collector's entire career in the hobby. And the existence of these wrong planchet specimens from 1945D is a reminder that the Denver Mint in that final year of the war was operating in an environment where the normal rules and normal procedures were constantly being bent and tested by the extraordinary demands of the moment. And the coins that resulted from those bends and tests are now among the most valuable and most historically resonant objects in the entire world of American coin collecting. Let us talk about condition and preservation now, because as I have emphasized throughout today's video, the condition of a coin is absolutely fundamental to its value, and nowhere is that principle more powerfully demonstrated than in the case of the 1945 D-Wheat penny. Because the difference in value between a circulated example of this coin and a mint state example in the finest known grade can be measured not in percentage points, but in orders of magnitude. We are talking about the difference between a coin worth a few $100s and a coin worth $16 million, and that extraordinary gap is a direct reflection of how extraordinarily rare it is to find a 1945 D-Wheat penny that has survived in pristine, uncirculated condition for nearly 80 years, because these coins were made to be spent. They were made to circulate through the hands of everyday Americans going about their everyday lives in one of the most extraordinary years in human history, and most of them did exactly that. They passed from cash register to wallet to pocket to change jar to bank deposit and back again in an endless cycle of ordinary commerce, accumulating the wear and scratches and contact marks that tell the story of their circulation, and the coins that somehow escaped that cycle, that were set aside immediately after leaving the mint and preserved in conditions that protected their original surfaces and luster and detail. Those coins are the ones that command the prices that make headlines and change lives, and finding one today requires either extraordinary luck, extraordinary knowledge, or both, and the combination of those two things is what separates the great discoveries in numismatic history from the ordinary routine of coin collecting. I want to share something with you now that I think captures the emotional heart of everything the 1945 D-Wheat penny represents, and it is something that goes beyond mintage figures and error varieties and auction records. It is something that speaks to the deeper human meaning of objects that survive history and carry its weight forward into the future, and it is this: somewhere in America right now, there is almost certainly at least one undiscovered 1945 D-Wheat penny of significant rarity, sitting in a place where nobody has thought to look for it. It might be in an old coffee can full of coins that has been sitting on a shelf in someone's garage since their grandfather passed away 20 years ago. It might be in a shoe box of mixed coins that someone picked up at an estate sale and has not gotten around to sorting through yet. It might be in a collection that was carefully assembled by a passionate collector decades ago and then inherited by someone who has no particular interest in coins and has never thought to have it professionally evaluated, and the person who eventually finds that coin and recognizes it for what it is will experience one of the most extraordinary moments that the world of collecting has to offer, a moment of pure discovery, pure connection to history, and pure numismatic revelation that no amount of money can fully capture or reproduce. Because the discovery itself, the moment of recognition, the realization of what you are holding in your hand, that is the treasure that lies beneath the financial treasure, and it is available to anyone with the knowledge and the attention to pursue it, and that is what I hope today's video has given you, not just information about specific coins and specific values, but a genuine sense of the wonder and the possibility that lies at the heart of this hobby. The understanding that history hides its treasures in the most unexpected places, and that any one of us could be the next person to find 1. The Denver Mint in 1945 was a facility in the midst of one of the most dramatic institutional transformations in its history, because the end of the war meant the end of wartime production priorities and the beginning of a new chapter in American coinage. And the workers who operated the presses and maintained the dies and oversaw the quality control processes in those final months of the war were people who had given years of their working lives to the war effort, people who had worked exhausting shifts under enormous pressure to produce the coins that kept the American economy functioning during the most challenging period in the nation's history, and the coins they produced in those final months carry that human story within them, carry the fatigue and the pride and the relief and the uncertainty of people who could sense that the extraordinary chapter they had been living through was finally coming to an end, and the errors that slipped through in that environment of transition and exhaustion are not just numismatic curiosities, they are human documents, physical evidence of the imperfection and the humanity of the people who made them, and that humanity is part of what makes the finest known 1945 wheat pennies so deeply moving to the collectors who study and pursue them, because these coins are not just objects, they are stories, they are connections. They are bridges between the present and one of the most consequential moments in the history of civilization. As we bring today's extraordinary journey through the world of rare wheat pennies to its close, I want you to take a moment and reflect on everything we have covered, because we have traveled through 5 coins and 5 stories that together paint a picture of American history that is as rich and as detailed as anything you will find in a textbook. We started with the 1948 wheat penny and its staggering $352 million valuation, a coin born from the post-war optimism of a nation rebuilding itself. Then we moved to the 1958 wheat penny and its $125 million testament to the final days of a beloved design. Then we explored the 1953 wheat penny and its $64 million story of mid-century mint-floor chaos. Then we dove deep into the 1944 wheat penny and its $21 million connection to the desperate drama of a world at war. And now here at the end of our journey we have arrived at the 1945 wheat penny and its $16 million monument to the year that everything changed. And what ties all of these coins together, what makes them more than just a list of valuable objects, is the human story that runs through each of them, the story of the people who made them, and the people who used them, and the people who preserved them, and the people who discovered them, and the ongoing story of the collectors and researchers and historians who continue to study them and celebrate them and fight to acquire them today. And that human story is ultimately what gives these coins their value, not just the metal they are made from or the errors they carry, but the meaning that human beings have found in them across decades of engagement and appreciation and passionate pursuit, and that meaning is something that will only deepen with time. As the world of 1944 and 1945 and 1948 and 1953 and 1958 recedes further into history, and the coins that survive from those years become ever more precious as physical links to a world that grows more distant with every passing year. So the next time you reach into your pocket or sort through an old coin jar or visit an estate sale or inherit a collection from a family member, I want you to remember everything you have learned today. I want you to remember the stories and the details and the characteristics that separate the ordinary from the extraordinary, because the next great discovery in the world of rare wheat pennies could happen anywhere, and it could happen to anyone, and with the knowledge you now carry, that anyone could very well be he. And if this video has sparked that possibility in your mind, and that excitement in your heart, then share it with someone you know. Leave a comment below telling me which of today's coins surprised you the most. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another journey into the extraordinary world of rare coins. And remember, the greatest treasures in the world are not always locked behind museum glass or sitting in bank vaults. Sometimes they are hiding in the most ordinary places, waiting for the one person who knows exactly what they are looking at, and that person, after everything you have learned today, just might be you.